Jesus Christ, Ryan, do you even know how to use a spreadsheet? Or do we need to get your teenage son in here to explain the basics? Laughter cracked through the glass-walled conference room like a whip, bouncing off the polished table where 12 faces gleamed under cold LEDs. The smirk on David Mercer's lips, my boss, my so-called mentor, twisted the knife deeper. He leaned back in his leather chair, one hand casually draped on the armrest, the other holding the presentation clicker like a weapon. A low murmur of chuckles rolled around the table. Some looked away, trying to spare me, but others, especially Claire from marketing, stifled grins, pretending to take notes. And then I saw her, Emily, my wife. She had come today, sitting quietly in the back, because David had invited spouses to celebrate team achievements. She gave me the smallest look, lips pressing together, eyes glinting with that fragile mix of sympathy and disappointment. My chest burned hotter than the fluorescent lights. I could feel sweat pinpricking my collar, the sharp tang of humiliation tightening my throat. My name is Ryan Cole. I'm 43 years old, from Dayton, Ohio, and as much as David thought he had broken me in that moment, he had no idea about the ace I'd been keeping quiet, the secret advantage I'd been building for months, invisible to everyone but me. The room shifted back to David's voice, booming about quarterly targets, revenue streams, how his strategic pivot had saved the firm, my ideas. My nights hunched over glowing monitors while Emily slept alone in our bed, my hands typing, graphing, calculating, writing. Every slide he clicked through, every statistic he touted, was mine. Yet here he was, basking in applause. Ryan here, David said again, sweeping a hand toward me like I was a joke to punctuate his punchline. He tried, bless his heart. But folks, execution matters, not just theory. Another ripple of laughter. I felt my knuckles press into the table so hard I thought the veneer might crack. In moments like these, you learn how much a man can endure before something inside him stops bending. Shame tastes metallic, like biting down on tin foil. It shocks your teeth, freezes your tongue. I wanted to stand, to shout, to drag David across that glossy floor and peel his smugness off him with my fists. But Emily's gaze pinned me in place. Not because she wanted me to stay quiet, no. She knew better. She knew I was already building something behind the silence. The meeting droned on, David directing applause at himself, the team nodding like a choir. At one point, Claire passed her phone under the table to another analyst, and I caught the glow of a text. Poor Ryan. Brutal, they snickered. I didn't flinch. The worst wounds aren't carved by enemies. They're etched by colleagues who watch you bleed and grin. Finally, the session ended. Chairs scraped back. People filed out, buzzing about the upcoming corporate retreat in Aspen, about drinks later at Jack's Tavern. I walked out without a word, Emily trailing close, her heels clipping sharp echoes on the tile. She grabbed my arm in the hallway. Ryan, she whispered. He crossed a line. You can't keep, I know. My voice was calm, too calm, like the eye of a storm that hasn't touched ground yet. Back at my desk, my screensaver glowed with a photo of our son, Ethan, in his baseball uniform. 11 years old, missing his front tooth, glove too big for his hand. He was why I hadn't quit. Why I hadn't let David shove me into obscurity. Why I had built something David didn't even know existed. Before we get deeper into this story, make sure you're subscribed, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're listening from. That night, Emily reheated leftover chili while I sat at the table with a legal pad. The steam rising from the bowl smelled of cumin and tomatoes, sharp and homey. I barely tasted it. The chili Emily's recipe from her mother had become my anchor over the years. A small tradition, a warm comfort after long days, one constant in the shifting chaos. As I scooped another bite, a thought carved itself deep. Traditions can also become weapons if used at the right time. I scribbled notes furiously. Steps, evidence, patterns. David's theft wasn't just one meeting, wasn't even 1 year. It had been building, project after project, recognition funneled upward, his name embossed where mine should have been, but I had proof. Contracts I had drafted with clauses he never bothered to read. Emails I had archived. Even a recorded conversation I had stored, almost forgotten, where he promised me the directorship as soon as the board approves. He never imagined I'd keep receipts. Emily watched me from across the table. You're planning something, she said. I looked up. I'm done playing defense. Ryan, be careful. she said, her spoon sinking into the chili. Men like him don't lose easy. They don't, I said. But when they do, they lose everything. The next morning, the office buzzed with talk of Aspen. David already parading his new ski gear in the lounge. He slapped my back as if nothing had happened yesterday. Big man, you ready for some slopes? I smiled, just enough to mask the fury. Wouldn't miss it. Inside, my mind ticked like a metronome. Every insult, every chuckle, every stolen line of credit, each was a thread, and I was weaving them into a noose. There's a line I've come to believe: humiliation is the down payment on revenge. And David had just invested heavily. Each was a thread, and I was weaving them into a noose, one that would tighten around David Mercer's throat the moment he leaned back too far in his chair, too smug to notice the fibers closing in. That thought carried me through the rest of the week like a live wire under my skin. I showed up early, left late, smiled when he tossed barbs across the office like darts. The trick with revenge isn't speed, it's patience. You let the other man believe he's invincible until the mirror cracks. And oh, how David loved his reflection. Friday night at Jack's Tavern, the team clustered around sticky tables, neon beer signs flickering above us. The jukebox played Tom Petty, the smell of fried wings thick in the air. David stood at the center like a ringmaster, telling the same recycled college football stories. I sat at the edge of the group, nursing a cheap draft, feeling the fizz scrape down my throat. Claire slid into the seat next to me, cheeks flushed, phone already in her hand. You okay, Ryan? She asked, tone feigned soft but eyes sharp, hungry for weakness. I gave her a thin smile. Just enjoying the show. She leaned in closer. You know, people are saying you looked, well, kind of wrecked in that meeting. The word wrecked jabbed me, but I didn't flinch. Instead, I let silence hang, the way silence makes others squirm. Sure enough, she filled it. I mean, don't take it personally. David's rough on everyone. But maybe you should, I don't know, lay low for a while? Her phone screen lit up between us, a chat group open. Mercer's crew. A new message from David himself popped in. Ryan's bringing his wife to Aspen? Hope she packs Patience Man's ski skills match his Excel. A wave of laughing emojis. Claire snorted before she could stop herself. Then she realized I'd seen. She fumbled to lock the screen. Too late. That little screenshot would find its way into a folder I kept hidden deep inside cloud storage under innocuous file names. Words have weight, and in the right hands they crushed. Later that night, Emily asked why I'd stayed so long. You hate those nights, she said, folding laundry while Ethan's video game sounds pulsed from the living room. I needed to hear what they'd say when they thought I wasn't listening. She paused, socks in her hands. And I heard enough. There's a philosophy that's settled into me. Betrayal doesn't just arrive, it announces itself in whispers, and snickers, and side eyes you pretend not to see. Most men ignore it. I've learned not to. By the time the Aspen retreat rolled around, snow dusted the Rockies like powdered sugar on a cake, crisp air biting every breath. The resort gleamed with luxury. Polished wood, fireplaces roaring, overpriced cocktails served in copper mugs. David strutted through the lobby like he owned the place. Emily at my side in her winter coat. Ethan back home with my brother for the weekend. I carried my suitcase with steady hands, but inside the storm pressed harder. That first night, after team dinner, David cornered me in the lodge bar. His cheeks glowed red from whiskey, his voice loud enough to draw glances. Ryan, my man. Heard you've been working late again. Gotta say, the hustle's adorable, but you know the board listens to results, not late-night grind. He slapped my back so hard my drink nearly spilled. Bystanders chuckled, even a few strangers at the bar smirked. Emily's nails pressed into my wrist. Don't bite, not yet. I smiled. You're right, David. Results speak louder than effort. Something in my tone made him pause. He squinted, then laughed it off, raising his glass. Damn straight. The weekend unfolded in curated chaos. Skiing by day, schmoozing by night. David never wasted a stage. He posed for photos, made grand toasts, pulled Emily aside once to brag about how he'd taken me under his wing. I caught the look in her eye, the silent please soon, and soon came faster than even I expected. On the second night, a board member, Richard Halstead, flew in to surprise the team. Gray suit even in the snow, handshake like a banker who never shed the city. David practically salivated. He pulled Richard into the lounge, waving for me to tag along. Richard, this is Ryan. David said. Brilliant ideas, bit rough on execution, but I polish 'em up. He laughed, as though I were a half-finished piece of wood he whittled in his spare time. Richard looked at me, then at David. Funny, I've been reviewing some proposals, initiative frameworks, cost savings models, thought they were authored by Ryan here? David chuckled, smooth as oil. Well, you know how it works, collaboration, collective effort. I take the kernel, build the vision, and Ryan here helps with the math. Something snapped quiet inside me. Not rage, no. Sharper than that. Precision. Actually, I said, meeting Richard's gaze, every data point in those proposals came from my models. Every word was mine. David's contribution was presentation polish. David's jaw flickered, smile faltering. Richard raised an eyebrow. The air between us tightened like a wire about to snap. Emily was across the room, watching, her hand frozen on her wine glass. David clapped my shoulder, too hard. Of course, Ryan's protective of his work, that's loyalty. That's why I keep him close. But Richard wasn't buying it. He sipped his drink, eyes calculating. That was the first fracture in David's armor, and I'd driven it clean. That night, in the quiet of our hotel room, Emily whispered, "You just picked a fight you can't walk back from." I stared at the snow falling outside, flakes dissolving against the glass. I don't want to walk back. I want him to run. There's another truth I've learned. Power isn't stolen in grand heists. It's siphoned, drop by drop, until the man who thought he owned the river realizes he's standing in dust. The next morning, I set the trap. While others headed to the slopes, I stayed back with a sore knee. Really, I slipped into the business center, logged into a private drive, uploaded the folder, screenshots, contracts, recordings. All time-stamped, all tied to my work, all undermining David's claims. But I didn't release it. Not yet. Revenge without timing is just noise. Emily found me hours later, hunched over the screen. "Ryan," she said softly, "this isn't just about proving you're right, is it?" I closed the laptop. No, it's about making him wrong forever. And when David strolled in later, bragging about conquering the double black diamond, his face wine-burned and cocky, I smiled at him, the way a hunter smiles at the deer already walking into his sights, oblivious to the snare coiled just beyond its hooves. David slapped my back again, unaware that every touch only deepened the ledger I was keeping. His arrogance wasn't armor, it was bait, and he didn't even know he was feeding me. The rest of the retreat unfolded like a stage play, every cast member following his cues, every laugh at his jokes, another bead of sweat I forced myself to swallow. Patience, Ryan. Patience. On the final evening, the board hosted a formal dinner. Crystal glasses lined the tables, snow-tipped peaks framed the windows, and the air buzzed with corporate theater. Emily sat beside me, her dress the shade of midnight, her eyes steady anchors. David held court across the room, champagne in hand, spinning tales of his strategies. The board members nodded, the younger staff hung on every word, and once again I was cast as the quiet supporting role in my own goddamn story. But this time I had lines to deliver. Halfway through the meal, Richard Halstead raised a toast. "To innovation," he said, his voice carrying authority that silenced the chatter. "To the brilliant ideas that keep this company alive." His gaze flicked to me for half a second, deliberate. David noticed. I saw his knuckles whiten on the stem of his glass. After the toast, while waiters cleared plates, I excused myself, slipping toward the lounge with my laptop bag. Emily touched my hand as I rose, her silent question burning in her eyes. I gave the smallest nod. It's time. In the quiet of the lounge, I connected to the hotel Wi-Fi, my heart thudding so hard I thought the whole room would hear it. I opened the folder. Screenshots of group chats mocking me, mocking the board, mocking even Richard himself. Emails where David forwarded my work to his personal account minutes before meetings, stripping my name from attachments. A recording clear as crystal where David promised me directorship, in writing, if only the board weren't so damn slow. Every file, date-stamped, cataloged. I compressed it all, titled it mercerlegacy.zip, and queued it. But not yet to the board. No, first to someone better. Claire. Because the cruelest way to expose a man like David is to let his own disciples turn on him. And Claire, with her gossip hunger and restless ambition, was the perfect domino. I drafted a short message, anonymous, untraceable. Since you're loyal to Mercer, thought you'd want to see how loyal he is to you. A friend. I attached the file, hit send, and closed the laptop. When I returned to the dining hall, Claire's phone was already buzzing. She read, eyes widening, face blanching pale under the chandelier glow. She looked across at David, then down again, then at me. I held her gaze just long enough to make her wonder. Then I looked away. By dessert, whispers were spreading. Claire excused herself, phone clutched like a grenade about to detonate. David, oblivious, was regaling Richard with another recycled tale of his Ivy League years. The man loved to build bonfires of his own ego, and tonight I'd poured gasoline at the base. Later, back in the room, Emily shut the door, leaned against it, and exhaled. You did something. I didn't deny it. He won't see the morning the same way. She crossed the room, cupped my face, eyes fierce. Ryan, once this starts, you can't stop it. I don't want to stop it. Her hand dropped, and for a moment she looked at me as if weighing the man she married against the man sharpening himself in front of her, but then she nodded, slow, resolute. That night I barely slept. My mind replayed the files, the words, the laughs at my expense. I thought of Ethan at home, of the example I wanted to set. A man doesn't let wolves devour his work, I whispered to the dark. He builds the fence higher. Morning broke with a crack. Phones buzzing, staff murmuring in the lobby, Claire pacing with her eyes darting like a cornered animal. The file had spread. Screenshots leaked into group chats, forwarded, dissected. David stormed into the breakfast hall, red-faced, demanding everyone ignore the bullshit rumors. His voice cracked, sweat beating at his temple. For the first time he looked small, but I wasn't finished. After checkout, as the bus loaded for the airport, Richard pulled me aside. His voice was low. Ryan, I don't know how you fit into this mess, but Mercer's credibility is, let's say, compromised. The board will convene soon. Be ready. Of course, I said. My voice didn't shake. Inside, a wildfire roared. On the flight home, David cornered me in the aisle. His breath reeked of coffee and panic. You think you're clever? He hissed. You think you can outmaneuver me? I built this company. I met his stare. Steady. Funny, I thought you just polished what others built. For a heartbeat, I thought he might swing at me right there. His fists clenched, jaw trembling. But then he straightened, plastered a fake grin on his face for the flight attendant passing by, and slunk back to his seat. That moment sealed it. David Mercer wasn't untouchable anymore. He was cracking, leaking panic in real time. And everyone could smell it. Back in Dayton, Emily and I sat at our kitchen table, chili reheating on the stove. The steam rose just like before, the same smell, the same spoons scraping against the pot. But this time, the tradition felt different, not comfort symbol. Proof that rituals, even humble ones, carry power if you decide they do. Ryan, Emily said, setting the bowls down. What happens next? I stared into the chili, the surface swirling with heat. Next, he walks into the trap he doesn't know I set years ago. Because hidden among the files was a clause I'd buried in a contract 3 years prior, a clause that tied credit ownership of all intellectual property under my department directly to me, not to management. David had signed it without reading, too eager to secure the deal. That clause was my loaded gun, and soon, the board would pull the trigger. But still, timing mattered. Exposure too fast and I'd look vindictive. Too slow and he'd recover. The art was in the squeeze, making him stumble step by step until he begged for the fall. I leaned back, spoon in hand, and let the words roll out, half to Emily, half to myself. The cleanest revenge isn't when you kill a man's body. It's when you let him watch his reputation bleed out in public, drop by drop, until even his shadow deserts him. And in that moment, the noose I'd been weaving all along felt tighter, closer, ready to pull, and I could almost hear the rope fibers creak against the weight of David Mercer's arrogance. The board meeting was scheduled for Monday morning, and every minute leading up to it tasted like electricity on my tongue. At the office, whispers stalked the hallways, eyes flicked toward me and then darted away as though contact might burn. Claire wouldn't even meet my gaze, she was too busy scrambling to distance herself from Mercer, suddenly full of chirpy greetings she never gave me before. Rats never wait for the ship to sink. They leap at the first smell of water. David tried to project his usual swagger, but panic leaked through. He shouted more in meetings, sent late-night emails full of contradictions, cornered junior staff with frantic trust me speeches. By Friday, he looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Shirt collars wrinkled, stubble creeping on his jaw. Watching him unravel piece by piece was almost better than the revenge itself, almost. Monday came cold and gray, sleet tapping the office windows. Emily kissed my cheek that morning, whispering, "Finish it." I walked into the boardroom with my laptop, my pulse steady, my face unreadable. David was already there, pacing like a caged animal, muttering to anyone who'd listen about doctored files and misunderstandings. Richard sat at the head, flanked by two other members, their expressions carved from stone. "We'll begin," Richard said, voice crisp. "There have been serious questions raised about the authorship of several key initiatives and the integrity of executive conduct." David jumped in, words spilling fast. "This is ridiculous anonymous rumors, malicious edits." I cleared my throat, interrupting. "If I may." All eyes turned. I connected my laptop to the screen, opened the contract from 3 years ago. Section 14B, Intellectual Property Ownership of Strategic Models and Analytic Frameworks, remains with the originating author within this department. Signed, David Mercer. The signature glowed under the projector light like a brand burned into his flesh. David lunged forward. "That's out of context. Is it?" I clicked again. Screenshots filled the screen. His mockery of me, of the board, of Richard himself. Laughter from Mercer's crew. Forwarded emails with my attachments stripped bare. And finally, the recording his voice promising me the directorship, laughing about how he'd spin the board until they bought whatever I sold. The silence that followed was thicker than stone. Richard leaned back, steepling his fingers. "David, care to explain?" David's face went from crimson to chalk in a heartbeat. He stammered, sputtered, tried to conjure words from air. None came. The man who could charm a room into handing him the keys to the vault now stood mute, drowning in his own bile. And then the killing blow came not from me, but from the world outside these walls. Claire, desperate to save herself, had already leaked the files to a journalist contact. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the first headline already leave, "Rising exec exposed, Mercer's legacy built on stolen work." The screen pinged again and again, the story spreading like wildfire. By the time David collapsed into a chair, gasping like a fish hauled from water, the court of public opinion had already carved his epitaph. Procedural justice doesn't roar, it whispers, and in those whispers men like David choke. He turned to me then, eyes bloodshot, spit flecking his lips. "You think you've won? You pathetic little." I leaned in, voice low, steel-wrapped. "No, David, you lost the moment you signed what you didn't read. The rest was just watching you write your own obituary." The board moved quickly, suspension pending investigation, reputation effectively dead. Security escorted him out while employees peeked from their cubicles, phones already raised to capture the fall of the giant. By afternoon, the video was online. David Mercer, once king of the glass tower, stumbling as two guards walked him through the lobby. Viral within hours. Every laugh he'd earned at my expense was now echoing tenfold back at him. Louder, crueler. That night, Emily served chili. Same pot, same steam, same smell of cumin and tomatoes. Except this time she ladled it into 2 bowls with a small smile, setting one in front of me like a victor's feast. "It's over," she said. I shook my head. "Not over, just finished." I stirred the spoon, watched the steam curl. Funny, isn't it? He thought he could take everything I made and call it his. And in the end, the thing that destroyed him was something he gave me, his signature. Emily reached across the table, squeezed my hand. "So what now?" I looked at her, then at Ethan's photo on the fridge, toothless grin frozen in time. "Now I work. Hard, honest, but smarter. Because once you've seen what betrayal costs, you never forget the bill. There's a saying I've come to carve into my bones. A man can survive failure, but he can't survive theft of his soul. And work your sweat, your nights, your ideas, that's a man's soul." Weeks later, David was gone. No job, no allies, his name a warning in headlines. I heard he tried to pitch himself to a rival firm, but the screenshots followed him like ghosts. Even his own disciples unfollowed, blocked, erased him. Reputation is America's real currency, and his account was overdrafted beyond repair. I didn't gloat. Revenge isn't about fireworks. It's about silence afterward, the clean quiet where your enemy's noise once lived. One night, long after, Ethan asked why I seemed lighter, like I'd finally exhaled something heavy. I ruffled his hair, smiled. "Because sometimes, buddy, the truth finally gets its turn." And as I turned off the kitchen light, I felt it fully. Scars where humiliation once burned, yes, but scars are proof you survived the fire. The life lesson I carried out of it all was simple, American plain. Never sign away your own worth. Never let another man eat from your plate while calling it his meal. And if someone tries, make damn sure the receipt has their name on it. If this story resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. It helps us share more true stories like this.